All right, hello and welcome. Today we're cracking open an unsolved case file on a massive, and I mean massive, global industry. Now, this isn't your typical whodunit, but it's a super high-stakes investigation into a problem that just won't go away. The diseases that are absolutely crippling shrimp farming. What we're about to get into are some real-world mysteries that, hey, maybe one of you could help solve one day. So let's jump right in with just one number, $15 billion. And that's the low estimate of the financial damage from just one pathogen, the infamous white spot syndrome virus. To put that into perspective, that's more than the entire annual economy of some small countries. So this isn't some small niche problem. It is an economic catastrophe that just keeps happening year after year all over the world.
And that really brings us to the central question, right? Shrimp farming is a booming business. It's essential for feeding a planet that keeps growing. So why on earth is it so incredibly fragile? Why, after decades of trying, are we still fighting, and a lot of the time losing, the battle against these tiny, microscopic enemies? Let's dig in.
To get to the bottom of this, here's our game plan. We're going to start with just how big this crisis is. Then we'll investigate the mysterious culprits, the pathogens themselves. We'll look at how we even find out a disease is there, the unique biological challenges shrimp have, why there are so few treatments, and finally, the single biggest roadblock that's holding back all the research. Okay, first up, let's head straight to the scene of the crime, the modern shrimp farm. You have to understand, disease isn't just a small part of the story here. It is the #1 thing stopping this industry from being truly sustainable. So here's the core of the issue. To make it all work, shrimp are farmed in really high densities. Just think of it like a super crowded city. If one person gets sick, it can spread like wildfire. And we're not just dealing with one or two bad guys here. We're talking about a whole lineup of viruses, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, you name it. And the crazy part is, despite everything we've tried, these outbreaks just keep happening. And that brings us to our first major knowledge gap, the pathogens themselves. I mean, you can't fight an enemy you don't really understand. And when it comes to the culprits behind these massive outbreaks, there's just so much we still don't know. This sounds like a simple question, but it's really not. We're constantly being hit with new emerging pathogens, and even the old enemies have some tricks up their sleeves. And sometimes it's not even one single thing causing the problem, but a whole conspiracy of microbes working together, which makes it even harder to figure out what's going on.
What's so wild about this is just the sheer variety of mysteries we're facing. I mean, look at white feces syndrome. It's a newer problem, stunts shrimp growth, and we still don't know for sure what causes it. Then you've got EHP, this tiny parasite spreading everywhere with no effective treatment. Or DIV1, a pretty new virus with no known control measures. And even the most famous villain of all, white spot, still has some big secrets.
Let's just focus on WSSV for a second. We know the scary stuff, right? We know it's super deadly, spreads incredibly fast, and it's cost billions. But here's the kicker, what we don't know. Where does it hide between outbreaks? How does it survive for months in the pond mud? Are there other animals like crabs or snails that are acting as secret carriers just waiting to reinfect a new batch of shrimp? This is a huge, huge blind spot.
Okay, so if we can't always identify the bad guy or even find its hiding spots, how are we supposed to catch it in the act? Well, that leads us to our next big problem, the tools we use for diagnosis, and why they're often not good enough. This slide just says it all. This is the old way of doing things, and it's a losing game. By the time a farmer actually sees sick shrimp, or even worse, starts seeing dead ones, it's already too late. They send some samples off to a lab, and days later, they get the bad news. The lab is basically just confirming a disaster that's already in full swing. It's totally reactive. The key here is we have to flip the script from being reactive to being proactive. The absolute dream is something like this, a fast, simple test that a farmer can use right there at the edge of the pond. That could give them a super early warning. And you know, researchers are making some amazing progress with new tech like CRISPR, but the gap is getting these amazing tools out of the fancy lab and onto the farm in a way that's cheap and easy enough for everyone to use. So let's just imagine we can detect a pathogen early. The next logical question is, can the shrimp actually fight it off? And this is where we hit a fundamental biological wall. We have to talk about the shrimp's own immune system. Before we talk about shrimp, let's quickly talk about us. You and I have something called adaptive immunity. When you get a vaccine or you get sick and recover, your body creates a memory of that bug. It's like putting up a most wanted poster for your immune cells. If that same bug ever shows up again, bam, your body launches a fast, powerful, targeted attack. This whole idea of memory is the entire reason vaccines work. Now,
Look at this. Shrimp are missing that entire adaptive system. They only have what's called innate immunity, which is sort of a general first responder system. But crucially, it has no long-term memory. None. This is the single biggest reason traditional vaccines are a massive, massive challenge for shrimp. It's like trying to teach something to a student who forgets the lesson every single day. So even if a shrimp survives an infection, it's just as vulnerable the next time around.
So, if vaccines aren't really an option, what do? Well, researchers are exploring other things. You've got immunostimulants, which can kind of supercharge the shrimp's basic defenses for a little while. There are probiotics, where you try to load the pond with good bacteria. And, of course, selective breeding to try and create tougher shrimp. Right now, the best tool is just old-fashioned biosecurity, basically building a fortress around the farm. But all of these have their own question marks and limitations.
So what happens when prevention doesn't work and an outbreak starts? Well, that's when we get to a section I like to call the empty medicine cabinet. Because when it comes to effective treatments, the options are, well, they're terrifyingly limited.
Let's just be absolutely clear on this one. For the viral diseases that cause the most damage, like white spot, there are no cures, no specific antiviral drugs, nothing. Zero. Once that virus gets going in a pond, farmers are left with almost no good choices. And this chart just shows you the desperate decisions they face. The most common thing to do is just harvest everything right away, even if the shrimp are too small, or just destroy the whole stock to cut your losses. A huge chunk of farmers can only do nothing, just watch and take the hit, and then there's that small group that misuses antibiotics out of desperation, even though they do nothing against viruses. It's just no good options. Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom. There is some mind-blowing, almost sci-fi research happening. I'm talking about things like phage therapy or RNA interference, which is a way to literally switch off a virus inside the shrimp. But, and this is a big but, these are all highly experimental. They're the future, for sure, but they are not the present. They are not ready to be used on the farm. So we've gone through mysterious pathogens, slow diagnostics, a tricky immune system, and no cures. You have to be asking yourself, why is progress so slow on all of this? And that brings us to the climax of our investigation, the one foundational problem that's holding everything else back. This quote right here from a research paper, this says it all. The lack of an immortalized cell line. Now, I know that sounds super technical, but this is, and I'm not exaggerating, the holy grail of shrimp disease research. Simply put, it's a population of cells you can just grow forever in a lab. So here's why that is such a huge deal. To study a human virus, scientists just grow it in human cells in a petri dish. It's fast, it's cheap, it's repeatable. For shrimp viruses, we can't do that because shrimp cells are just notoriously difficult to keep alive outside of a shrimp. They're fragile, they just kind of self-destruct. This means for almost every single experiment, to test a drug, develop a vaccine, or even just understand how a virus works, researchers have to infect live shrimp. It makes everything incredibly slow, unbelievably expensive, and ethically complicated. It is the single biggest bottleneck holding back the entire field. So we've just walked through a whole series of unsolved cases and critical knowledge gaps, but I want to end by reframing all this. For every student watching this, every single gap we've talked about today isn't a failure, it's an opportunity. It is a research question, just waiting for a brilliant mind like yours to come along and tackle it. From cracking the code of shrimp immunity to finally developing that game-changing cell line. So the final question isn't what we don't know, it's which one of these profound challenges will you help solve? Thanks so much for tuning in.